Hi, Miss Chrissy. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay, so today we're recording a quick call on coming to your senses and how, I don't know, it's almost a foreign concept in Western culture that we take care of our senses. We
Mhm.
take care of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and skin touching.
Mhm.
I've learned them as kriyas, they're called, the way
Mhm.
I've learned to express them. And kriyas just sort of being the daily things that you do to take care. And the kriyas that I know don't necessarily take care of all five senses, but that's the word. How do you
Mhm.
practice it?
I think that same kind of thing in terms of taking care, nourishing, cleansing
Mm-hmm.
on a daily basis. And again, it hasn't been all those senses. Reading the chapter, I think some of the things are interesting that I haven't tried yet. But it is, and it's about starting to again refine how we take care of ourselves.
Yeah,
Each chapter seems to be honing in and refining, so
yeah,
this is a deeper refinement now, right?
yeah. And
Mhm.
in the eight limbs of yoga, so if yoga is made up of eight different branches of the same tree. Asana, so movement is one branch, pranayama, breath is one branch, meditation is a branch. There's a
Mhm.
whole branch of this tree that's called pratyahara,
Mhm.
withdrawal of the senses. And so this idea that practicing almost turning your senses, I'm not even going to say off, but I like to think of it as taking the senses that are always like trying to make sense of the world around us, right? Hearing
Mhm.
noises, like seeing things, tasting things, touching things. Like our senses are always trying to
Mhm.
make sense of the world, and have time where you sort of turn those senses inward,
Mhm.
and you are using that energy that usually the outward senses would be trying to gain information from the outside world and directing it inward. Am I frozen?
Definitely. And that is the whole idea. It's a withdrawing of the senses. It's all day they go out. They're busy. They're watching, feeling, they're listening, and it's all outward directed. And we learn to withdraw. So it's not about any of that external stuff changing. It's about how we start to change our attention and our awareness. And we start to have better control over our senses. And that means taking care of them so
Mm-hmm.
that they can turn inwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so is taking care of your senses turning inward, or what are some practical things that help you take care of your senses in a very intentional way?
Mhm. Well, the two that I do daily, the tongue scraping, right? And Neti Pot. Those are the two ones that I do daily. The one that I'm interested in, I still haven't done yet, is putting oil in my ears. I don't know why. I haven't gotten around to that. So those are the two consistent ones that I am doing daily, right? To kind of, and I think of cleansing as well, because then it keeps the tongue, the taste buds healthy,
Mm-hmm.
keeps your nasal passages clean and flushed out. So for pranayama practices and breathing practices and stuff like that. So I look at it as a daily cleansing and letting go, so that then you can nourish by being able to taste more fully and to be able to use your breath for your pranayama practices and stuff like that. So that's how I kind of look at and then any deep relaxation practices, allowing the senses to rest, eyes closing, and hearing withdrawing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge part of it too.
And really, in the book that we're reading, Abhyanga has been lifted almost from this chapter and given its own
Mm-hmm.
chapter, but oiling the skin is really just should be in this chapter.
Yes, yes.
Part of this taking care of the senses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this idea of cleansing, now we always talk about detox and that sort of thing, but the neti pot and the tongue scraper are both almost like mini detoxes.
Yeah, they are. I don't think of it as detox though. I do think of it as like nourishing, cleansing and nourishing. Cleansing and nourishing to keep them fresh all the time, right? And the sense is working well. I guess when I think of detox, I think of something a little bit more harsh and strict and regimented.
Yeah.
Whereas I enjoy these. So for me, I love doing it and it feels good for me, right?
Yeah.
No resistance to it. So I guess that's why I don't think of it detox, but you could in a sense.
Yeah.
And that you're flushing things out on a daily basis.
Yeah. And so do you feel like you have these two kriyas, the Neti Pot and the tongue scraping, kind of like down in your habits?
Totally. Those are non-negotiables too.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah. How about you?
It depends. I find that the Neti Pot, it falls in and out of favor in my world still. I come back to it every time I feel like I've got congestion and I'm allergy, all that kind of stuff is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really good with the Neti Pot right now because that's happening. And tongue scraping. I'm a little bit more consistent with tongue scraping, but I'm not actually doing some of the things it talks about in the book. Like I'm not looking for deeper meaning yet in what I'm reading. I'm not reading my tongue and looking for deeper meaning, but just scraping and letting that be the practice.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I do that. I mean, I'm looking at the changes in my tongue and I'm seeing if there's coating or not. I pulled out her little chart the other day and was like, oh, because I have what's called a geographic tongue. And so I get spots and weird things on it. And it's funny because a homeopathic doctor finally told me like 10 years ago that people with migraines often have this, whereas I'd never heard it before. And my doctor had no idea. And then the Ayurvedic doctor told me the same thing when I saw them in India. It's called a geographic tongue. So my tongue's crazy. I get spots, they shape shift, they change color. It's so weird. But so now I'm at a point where I want to look at that more deeply and see.
So it's almost like it's like an SO. It's a system of communicating with you. Mm-hmm. You don't know how to read the language yet.
I don't.
Yeah, that's what's so neat about Ayurveda is it looks at everything that's going on in your body as a system of communication, and it's our job to sort of start to try and decode it and understand it. I don't think we could actually read the tongue without help from somewhere else.
No, I don't think so either.
You can just go in with your intuition and go, oh.
No. Although I did look, because I had this one spot in the back right, I guess. And when I looked on her chart, it was the liver area. Oh. So I'm wondering if maybe, then I'm like, oh, well, maybe I need to like look at my liver and start to, cleanse my liver or something. I don't know. But
even if you get that far, now I'm like, okay, what do I do with that piece of information? Yeah. So when
I started to actually Google like, why would you need a liver cleanse and things like that, just to see like what's going on. But a lot of it again had to do with hormones, which was super interesting.
Right.
And so then I'm kind of like, oh, interesting. So playing.
Yeah, the thing is that it can sometimes lead you down a rabbit hole of trying to investigate too much.
Yes.
And so if we just sort of back off that idea and just go back to the idea that these can be simple steps. And I heard someone this week describe healing this way. She is a massage therapist and acupuncturist, and she described her work this way. She's like, I know that I can put needles into certain parts of your body and those needles will affect certain things. Mm-hmm. Because what I don't know, she goes, what I don't know is what your body is going to do with the healing that I offer it. I know that if I place a needle somewhere, it opens up this channel. And when that channel is open, this healing is available to this area or whatever. She goes, but your body then receives that and goes, oh, thank you. I know exactly what I'm going to do with that. And it puts it works on healing something. And she said, sometimes on the outside, we don't see what work is being done in that healing because it hasn't reached, the sore shoulder that we came to do acupuncture for, right? But we don't realize the behind the scenes stuff that's happening so that the body can get to your sore shoulder.
Yeah.
And I sort of see the coming to your senses, the sense care that way. I don't necessarily know how it supports me to, when I'm done Abhyanga, when I'm done Abhyanga, I just take my greasy, oily fingers and I rub them in my ears and in my nose.
Yes.
And then tongue scraping and Neti Pot, which maybe I need to just play with more regularly, not just because maybe it would actually stop the allergy symptoms from starting. But I see those things the same way, where I might not be able to see the domino effect of that habit in my body yet. I just have to trust that it's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think that's a great thing, because we don't know, and we don't know what's actually happening on a really subtle level either, right? All we can do is keep going with the little practices. And again, there's that cumulative effect.
Yes.
And so we don't know all the little tweaks and changes that are shifting and changing underneath the surface, but what it is doing on levels that we don't know, it's building up our reserves, and it's building up, right? So it's a deeper nourishment that's actually happening, even though we don't really feel it, like you said, in the moment, or there's a domino effect, that kind of thing, but it's happening, and we have to trust that.
And as we come to sort of the end of these habits, I feel like that even more. Like I feel like the first habit, closing down your kitchen, right? And having, it's like that habit to me, I can feel it on a 24-hour basis. That habit, the repercussions and the benefits of that habit become really tactile for me. Whereas as we go through these habits, now it starts to be more subtle. Now we're working on a more subtle level, and the immediacy of the results might not be the same. Is there anything that you could attribute specifically to these kriyas when all these other habits we've done? So this is like habit 9. So we've done all these other things, and we get to these kriyas, we get to these taking care of the senses habits. Is there anything you can say, oh, these kriyas are responsible for this, over and above other benefits that have happened?
Say that in a different way.
Well, for me, I don't think I can attribute any specific benefits that I'm feeling to the kriyas, to the tongue scraping. Except, no, maybe that's not true. Because the tongue scraping, for me, is that I feel like I'm getting better access to my taste buds. Yeah.
So that's one thing. I definitely feel like I'm getting better access to my taste buds.
And then does that correlate to making better eating decisions?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And I think not just better eating choices or decisions, but I think I have a better discernment of the taste and when I feel fulfilled. So as opposed to waiting till it gets down to my stomach and being like, okay, you're full. Now it's more like, oh, I can feel those tastes more fully, and I don't need as much to feel that satisfaction of it, I guess maybe would be the word, right?
So my analogy that's coming to mind is on long stretches of highway, often when you have a signal light coming up, you'll end up beforehand having like the pre-warning signal light that says, I know it's green up here, but you should start slowing down because it's gonna turn yellow.
Yeah.
So it's like your taste buds, instead of having to wait and slam on your brakes at the traffic light, all of a sudden the taste buds are giving you the little
heads up,
pre-warning heads up. Yeah.
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. What about Neti Pot?
So this can inspire you to do it every day.
Yeah, please inspire me to do it every day.
When my teacher was teaching us, he was just saying that obviously our breath is so important because our breath is the subtle or the tangible force of prana, right?
Yes.
And we have to be breathing in through our nose and out through our nose, mostly because that's where we actually are activating those energy channels. It's not through our mouth. So it's the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is one of the texts that explain these different kriyas.
Yes.
And it was written in the 1500s, I think. And he was saying look how much our air quality has changed. Look at how much our food quality has changed. Look at how much everything we take in from our senses has changed. And so these practices are like, they're cleansing, they're purifying, they're releasing stuff that we gather through the day. And so that Neti Pot, he said, it needs to be done every day because we need to be constantly clearing out those subtle impurities that we're breathing in through the day, that we're taking in, that it's subtle, we don't even know it. And yet that slow buildup is what then affects our senses. It affects our, like if you have allergies and stuff like that. I rarely get sick. Like I should cross my fingers. But I swear, like every day my Neti Pot for 10 years, it's a non-negotiable, right? And
tell me your process. Are you a Neti Pot user who uses tap water or distilled?
So I just had this conversation on Sunday with my workshop because they're like, do you use distilled water? No, I use tap water.
Yeah. So
I run it till it's warm. It has to be quite warm because our insides are warm.
Yeah.
And then
that was my trouble with distilled, is that I always wanted it to be warmer than it was, and getting it warmer was always such a challenge when I could just run the tap for a second and get
exactly. And my sister's a doctor, and I told her to go back to tap water and warm water. And she's like, my husband will kill me if I do that. So she wouldn't. She's using the distilled water, and that's what she feels comfortable with. And that's fine. But one, I want to make it as easy as possible for myself. So I do it every day. Yes. If I have to go warm that distilled water up and go upstairs to the kitchen and heat it up, no, like that makes it way too complicated. Yeah. And I have not had any issues, so I figure it's working.
And what about the salt solution, baking soda? Like, what are you using in terms of your solution in your Neti Pot to make it more saline, more in keeping with the fluids of your body?
Yeah. So I just use non-iodized sea salt. It has to be non-iodized, right? And you have to play around with it to find the perfect balance for you because everybody's tissues are different. But I think it's a 1/4 teaspoon, probably cup, and I do 1 cup per side.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
So, and the water needs to be fairly warm, like I would say almost more than lukewarm. Yeah. Because again, our insides are warm, and you'll know. I was just saying to my class, I'm like, it's kind of like you'll know if it's not right, if it's too cold, or if you don't have enough salt or too much. It's that feeling of jumping into a swimming pool and the water going up your nose, and it burns and it feels horrible.
Yeah, if you have too much salt. Too much salt, your body goes, whoa, too much salt.
Exactly. But then all these things have that negative experience, and we're like, oh, I don't want to do that. It felt terrible. Yeah. So it is playing around. And even I had a friend that she didn't know that she had soft water in her taps. And that feels absolutely horrible. Yeah. So once she figured that out.
It almost is coating everything that is supposed to be cleansing.
So once she figured that out, she just went up to her kitchen tap and started doing it from the kitchen tap. But she didn't know all these years, and she hated doing it, so it's why she never did it. And then she's like, I just found out we had a soft water tank. And it was like, oh, that's why your neti doesn't feel good.
Yes.
So it took years, But
all these subtle ways that, and your body, it not feeling good in a way is your body telling you don't have this recipe right yet.
Exactly.
Whether it's temperature or salt or the water. Mm-hmm. So those are all things that you play with. Because I too have friends that are they just swear by the distilled water. And my belief is that if you have a trust in the purity of that distilled water, and you're pouring that in your sinus cavity, then stay with that trust.
Totally.
And if you don't have that same trust over your tap water, then that trust factor is important in this whole process, because this whole process is about trust. And you sort of starting to do habits that your body then says, oh, thank you. That one. Because that's what we're trying to get. We're trying to elicit from our bodies sort of like a sit up and take notice and like, oh, thank you. That was really good.
And learning to trust yourself as well.
Yeah. And so I tell people too, if tap water and you don't have any sort of issues, do it.
Yeah.
If you do, then distilled will be what you want.
Totally.
And if you need to buy specific little salt packets on the internet because that makes you feel good, you go right ahead. If you're happy with your Himalayan salt, shaking it into your Neti Pot, then that's okay too. There's a million different ways to do this, as long as you don't feel like you're doing it wrong.
Totally.
Because feeling like you're doing it wrong is probably meaning you are.
Yes. And also, again, killing that part of you that is trying to trust yourself, right? Because you're like, I keep doing this and yet it doesn't feel good. Well, why am I doing it? Because someone's told me to, but it doesn't feel good.
Yes.
And then
we don't want any of this. We don't want any of you to be doing it because we told you to. All of this is like, do a self-experiment.
Exactly.
Your body, what is the reward?
Exactly.
Some of these habits are going to give you this big, beautiful reward for participating in them. And those are the ones that you're going to make your keystones and ground into them, and you'll build habits around that keystone, those keystones. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll speak to you soon.
Sounds good.